Hi everyone, welcome back to Chapter 8. In this video, we're going to finish up Chapter 8 and continue talking about stimulus control. Specifically, we're going to talk about behavioral contrasts. So in other words, behavioral contrasts is the rate of reinforcement on one component changes in one direction, and the rate of response for the other component changes in the opposite direction. So, as one goes up, the other goes down, vice versa. Now, there's two types of behavioral contrast that we're going to talk about. Negative behavioral contrast and positive behavioral contrast. You will need to know the very subtle differences between the two, so please make sure you understand both. Maybe try to come up with fun examples. And if you're confused, you need help, send me an email. Put a post in the discussion board I have on Blackboard. Ask a fellow student. So many options. But of course, you can always ask me, come to office hours, or send me an email. So first, negative contrast effects. This is where there is an increase of reinforcement on one component, which produces a decrease of response to the second. Okay, so here we've got that schedule of reinforcement, multiple schedules that we talked about, where we've got a pigeon, for example, that has to peck a red key and gets food. It has a VI of 60 seconds, and then there's a green key that has also a VI of 60, and it gets food after that. So you do one, then the other. Both have a VI of 60. Now, if we increase the rate of reinforcement, in other words, we are taking the red key and you're going to get food more often. So that's increasing the rate. So now we have a VI of 30. Okay, so as the VI decreases, the rate of reinforcement increases. Okay, so you're getting food more often. So if this was, say, a fixed ratio of 60 pecks versus a fixed ratio of 30 pecks, obviously 30 pecks, we get more food than is available on the red key than the green key, okay? So here, the green key staying the same. The red key has more reinforcement available. What does that do to responding? So how does that affect the behavior of this pigeon? What the pigeon's going to do is it's going to peck the red key more often and the green key less often. Okay, so by increasing the amount of reinforcement on the red key, we are causing less responses to the green key. Okay, so that's negative contrast effect. You increase reinforcement to decrease response on the other component. Now, your textbook has a very interesting example using a woman and her husband and flirting with guys at work. I don't know who wrote this chapter, but I think they got issues going on at home. I mean, really, guys. But it kind of works, but I think we can come up with a better example of a negative contrast effect. We could talk about instead, say, toys and little kids. So maybe they've got a red truck and they've got a green army man. Now, our kid, plays with the green truck for, say, 60 minutes, gets reinforced with a fun time, plays with the green army man for 60 minutes, gets rewarded with a good time, maybe food, who knows. Then, all of a sudden, maybe after nap time, maybe the next day, then now the green truck, you get rewarded with food for playing with the green truck after 30 minutes. And the green army man, you only get reinforced every 60 minutes still. So which toy is the child most likely to play with? Well, the child's going to pick to play with the red truck more often because it only takes 30 minutes to have fun, whereas the Green Army Man, it takes 60 minutes to have fun. Okay? So it's really, you train them where they, option A, option B, same reinforcement. And then you change the reinforcement on one of them so that one has more reinforcement than the other, and then you let your subject choose which one they want to interact with. And you're going to see they are going to choose to spend more time with the object with more reinforcement. Now, are they still going to play with the Green Army Man? Sure. But they're not going to spend as much time with the Green Army Man as they would with the red truck. Okay? So that's the negative contrast effect. Now, what about the positive contrast effect? And how is this different? So here we see a decrease in the reinforcement on one component, which results in an increase of response to the other. So here we are starting where we started with the negative contrast. It's the exact same. So the red key for this pigeon has to peck, the red key has a VI of 60 and it gets food. The green key has the exact same VI of 60 seconds to get food. So the reinforcement rate for option 1 and option 2 are the exact same at the beginning. Now, this is where we start to differ, where here our reinforcement rate decreases. In other words, it takes more effort to get reinforcement on the red key now. Okay, so now it's a VI of 120 seconds, or 2 minutes. So now the red key only gets reinforced every 2 minutes. And what that means is it takes more effort to get food from the red key. So what's going to happen to our behavior of the pigeon? Well, the pigeon is going to want food with the least amount of effort. So it's going to start spending more time on the green key. Okay, so the green key has its original reinforcement of VI of 60 seconds. So it's going to spend more time on the green key than it would on the red key because the green key is now giving it more food. Okay, so how is this different than negative contrast effect? The thing here is how does the reinforcement change? If the reinforcement increases, it's negative. If the reinforcement decreases, it's positive. Okay? So how does the availability of your reinforcement change? That's what will make or show you which contrast effect it is. Okay? And then the positive or negative contrast effect is talking about the rate of response. So is your response or responding of the other component increasing or decreasing? Okay, so how does reinforcement of option A, I'm going to draw again. I know you guys love it when I draw. Okay, so we've got option A over here and option B over here. Okay, so how you choose if it's positive or negative is you look at option A. Did the rate of reinforcement increase or decrease? And then how will that affect behavior of option B? Okay, so always assign A to whatever's changing and then B to your other option. And that's how you can figure out whether it's positive or negative contrast effect. Okay, so here again, A is changing from reward every 60 seconds to a reward every 120 seconds. So we get a decrease in the rate of reinforcement. We get less food over time, and that leads to an increase in responding to option B. Okay, so we're going to respond more to the green key. But remember, option B is never changing its reinforcement rate. So what's an example here? We can talk about maybe, let's go with tantrums. Maybe, the kid throws a tantrum, and the kid is also sucking his thumb. Okay, those are the two behaviors we've got. The mom reinforces the tantrum after 10 minutes of throwing a tantrum. Mom reinforces the behavior of sucking their thumb after 10 minutes. Now, if the mom doesn't reinforce throwing a tantrum until every 20 minutes, then that's going to lead the child to actually suck their thumb more, because they're being reinforced for sucking their thumb more often than they are for throwing a tantrum. Okay? Cool. Come up with your own examples. I'm sure you guys can come up with really fun examples of a negative contrast versus a positive contrast. And you can also then come up with an example of an anticipatory contrast. Whoa. So this is where your responding will change based on an upcoming change in the rate of reinforcement. So if you know the rate of reinforcement is going to change in the future, then you're going to change how you behave before that change occurs. Okay? So, for example, maybe you are like here, you're at the movie theater. Maybe that's you. For us growing up, my parents would buy us popcorn, but whatever we didn't eat by the end of the movie, we got thrown away. So we got reinforced for being at the movie by getting food, but once the movie was over, we no longer got the food. So as the movie came to the end, as the credits started to roll, we started stuffing that popcorn in our mouth. We changed our behavior. We started eating more popcorn because we knew that popcorn would be taken away in the near future. Okay, so that's anticipatory contrast. Again, you can come up with really fun examples. Say you know that the pigeon knows that after lights out, so after nighttime, then they don't get to any food anymore. So what happens is the pigeon, as the day goes on, might start to respond more and more near the end of the day than at the beginning of the day, because, oh no, the rate of responding or the rate of reinforcement is going to change. I'm no longer going to be rewarded for pecking this key, so I'm going to peck it a whole lot right now so I get as much food as possible before that reinforcement rate changes. Okay, then we've got our errorless discrimination training. So this is kind of a modified way of discrimination training, where we have a gradual training procedure that actually minimizes the number of errors. Because in normal discrimination training, then when you start, then we get a lot of original responses to that S delta, where we only want responses to the SD, right? So with errorless discrimination training, then it's a way to train the discrimination of SD and S delta without punishment for responding to the S delta, without having to go through the whole process of training the animal not to respond to the SD. And what this does is it can reduce some of those adverse effects that's associated with discrimination training, such as it can cause frustration and aggression because, it's frustrating to learn a new task sometimes. So errorless discrimination has been developed to remove those adverse effects. And there's two steps that can be taken. You can do both, you can do one. The first is that the S delta is introduced early in training, so soon after the animal has learned to respond appropriately to the SD. So in other words, if with our black cap chickadees, they have to respond to a female and not to a male. So what we're going to do is we're going to first train them with when they're only going to hear a female song, and they're going to respond by hearing the female song, and they get food if they respond. Awesome. Now, once they have appropriately learned that when they hear a female song, they go to the feeder, they get food. So maybe every time they hear a female song, if 80% of the time they hear a song, they go to the feeder, then we're going to move on to this step where we're going to introduce a male song. So the male song is our S delta, the song that they are not supposed to go to. So we're going to present the S delta now. So now they're going to hear a female song and they're supposed to go to the feeder. And now they hear a male song where they're not supposed to go to the feeder. So because it's early on, and they haven't had too much experience with the SD yet, then we're going to avoid frustration with trying to figure out the difference between the two. Another option is presenting the S delta in a weak form at the beginning and then gradually strengthening it. So this can actually be called fading. So you're kind of fading the SD in, or you could fade it out. And this might work with if you're using like different tones. So we might present the female song at full volume, because that's the SD, but the male song will start in a very low volume, and then as they seem to learn it, we'll slowly turn up the volume on the male song until it's finally at the same volume as the SD, as that female song. And that'll kind of train them to not only respond, at first then they're only responding, to the one at full volume, but they're also then slowly learning the difference between the male song and the female song. So we're fading that male song in, okay? Now, choosing which one of these to use, or if you want to use both of them, can actually depend on your stimuli. So for instance, introducing an S delta in early can be very difficult and not a great option if your S delta and your SD are super similar. So for instance, with the black-capped chickadees, with that male song and female song, we actually don't do this. And that's because a male song sounds almost the same as a female song. There's only slight differences. So it's very hard to tell the difference. So introducing the male song early can actually confuse the animals. So we wait until the SD is fully realized before presenting the male song. But this would be a good one to do like early and different if, say, you're doing a red light versus a green light. Those are very different. So introducing it early when the stimuli are more different is easier. Okay, whereas fading with a red light and a green light, that doesn't really make sense. A light red light versus a strong red light, there isn't much difference. So with a red light versus green light, you probably do number 1, but not number 2. But with the male and female song, we'll more likely to do number 2, but not number 1. Okay, so you have 2 options for errorless discrimination training. You can do both or just one. But again, it depends on your stimuli. So the final thing that we're going to talk about is additional applications for stimulus control in operant conditioning. The biggest one, and probably the most exciting, is using operant conditioning and these different stimulus control processes in training animals. So we use operant conditioning a lot in animal research, but also in animal welfare. So in zoos, in aquariums, then keepers will use operant conditioning to train animals to do certain behaviors, which provides enrichment for them. So they don't get bored, so they're able to use their minds. And it helps them, just kind of have fun, because a lot of these animals are very intelligent. So, for instance, in dolphins, in dolphin training, then even in just aquariums where they don't do like the tricks and stuff, then we still will use targeting behavior, or target training, so that we get animals to do a certain behavior in order to get food. Again, it's fun for them. And here, then we're doing target training. So this is where they have to boop their nose on a target. In this instance, it's her hand, or over here, his hand. So they have to come up out of the water, boop her hand, and then they get food. And that's target training. You can also use an actual target. I've done research with pigeons before where we were training them to use a touch screen, and they had to peck a specific place on the touch screen. And we do that using target training as well. And that's a way of using operant conditioning. We are then able to use multiple schedules as well. So they have to do behavior A, then behavior B. So maybe they have to boop her hand and then spin in a circle and then get food. So that could be, so boop her hand, get food, spin in a circle, get more food. But they can't boop her hand twice and get 2 pieces of food. Okay? So that's an example of how we can use our stimulus control. We can also use stimulus control to reduce problem behaviors. So how we do that is we want to put a certain behavior on cue or train an animal to do a behavior that maybe they do by themselves that we don't really like. And by training them to do the unwanted behavior but only at certain times means that they're actually less likely to do that negative behavior on their own, so in absence of the cue. So your textbook tells the story of a dolphin trainer who wanted to put kind of like glasses on the dolphin. The dolphin didn't want to do it and avoided her, sank to the bottom of the pool. So she started training the dolphin to sink to the pool. And she said, okay, when I come in, sink to the pool, and then I'll give you food. Or, I'll give you food and then you sink to the pool. And then the dolphin would only sink to the pool when she told it to. So now when she puts the suction cups or kind of glasses on the dolphin, then she is able to do that without the dolphin sinking to the bottom of the pool because she didn't tell the dolphin to sink to the bottom of the pool. And the dolphin's now been trained to only do it when she tells her to. So we have avoided that problem behavior of sinking to the bottom when we don't want it. There's also, of course, the example of a dog barking. You could use the example of, kind of like potty training is kind of an example. When you're born, you can't really control it. You just kind of go whenever you have to, wherever you are, because you got a diaper on, and it's fine. But then with potty training, you're training your child or your puppy or whoever to only go to the bathroom, which may be a problem behavior perhaps, on the cue of the toilet. So now when you're not at the cue, then you don't use the bathroom because you're not on the toilet. The cue of the toilet is not there. So we're able to reduce that problem behavior of going to the bathroom whenever and wherever because we've trained it to be a behavior associated with a toilet. Okay? And then, of course, we can also use operant conditioning and stimulus control procedures for the treatment of insomnia or sleep onset insomnia for people that have difficulty falling asleep. Your textbook walks you through a procedure that some scientists have developed where pretty much it's a way of slowly associating your bed with sleep and not with anything else. So don't use your bed for anything other than sleep. Don't drink caffeine before a certain time of day. Don't use your cell phone in bed. Don't use your computer in bed. That kind of stuff. So you're slowly associating your bed with sleep. If you're laying in bed for a long period of time and you can't sleep, get out of bed. And then only go back in the bed when you're sleepy. So again, you're associating the bed with sleep. And if you're not sleeping, then you get out of the bed. Okay? So many additional applications you can use operant conditioning in. I think you guys did such a great job with your classical conditioning examples for the midterm that maybe, and by maybe I mean we're doing it, I would love to hear a operant conditioning example that you guys can do at home that you want to do. So I'm going to give you another assignment for the final. It's going to be exactly the same, a 10-point question, where I'm going to ask you to tell me about a operant conditioning task that you did. Again, you can do it on yourself. You can do it on a significant other, a family member, a friend, a pet. I know some of you did it on family members and they did not appreciate it. So maybe don't do it on them again. Or you could do, something like give them candy or something. Do something where you're rewarding them. With operant conditioning, it's a lot easier because you can actually tell someone you're going to do it, whereas operant or classical conditioning, you don't usually want to tell them you're doing it. So give it a try. The question's going to be almost exactly the same. So you can look at your midterm and look at the answers, the feedback I gave you, and see, if you didn't get pro points, what you need to change. You can email me your ideas. I'll give you feedback. If you have questions about your midterms, send me an email. But let's see what examples you guys can come up with for operant conditioning. It should be fun. So, in summary for Chapter 8, extinction occurs in operant conditioning very similar to classical conditioning. We have many factors that affect how well extinction occurs. So, what's going to be resistant to extinction and what's not. Also, we saw that there's a lot of stimulus control, and changing the stimuli, how we present the stimuli, can actually change our responding. Changing the reinforcement to the stimuli can change our responding. And then, of course, I just gave you guys that fun assignment of doing operant conditioning at home. Do something fun. You can do it to yourself. Reward yourself for something. I don't know. Office hours, as always, will be Thursday at 4 p.m. It is the same link as before in the announcement, so you can just look at your old announcements and find the link if you want to come. Your midterm grades are up. I believe you have viewing capabilities of your entire exam, so you can see the feedback I gave you, you can see what questions you got wrong. If you don't for some reason, send me an email and we will set up a meeting where we can go over it together. So, have a great day and let me know if you have any questions.